Welcome to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, the place where teachers from around the world meet to share innovative ideas about music education. Listen and learn as we help you motivate your students, grow your income, expand your studio, and become a more creative piano teacher.
Welcome to episode 79 of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, and thanks heaps, as always, for listening. My name is Tim Topham, and I'm the teacher behind the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, the piano teaching blog at timtopham.com, and the InnerCircle Piano Teaching Community. My passion is supporting creative piano teaching, and that means doing things a little bit differently. Whether it's through podcasts like this one, the hundreds of articles on my blog, my training courses, downloads, lesson plans, all the benefits of membership of my community, the goal is the same: to hold your hand when you need it, to push you along, to give you a heap of great ideas, to streamline your business and productivity, and to help you set and achieve goals. And look, ultimately, to help you provide the richest, most exciting and fun learning experiences possible for your students. Today's show notes and all of the links that you need are at timtopham.com/episode 79. In today's episode, we're talking all about rote teaching, what it is, what it isn't, how to do it, why you should do it, and all the good stuff. And my guest today is a fantastic teacher by the name of Amy Greer. Recognized for her creative approach to piano teaching, Amy holds master's degrees in both piano performance and educational psychology, and frequently gives workshops exploring the intersection between the psychology of learning and music. In addition to her work as a teacher and clinician, she's an active performer, both as a soloist and as a collaborator with other musicians. She has performed with the New Mexico Symphony Orchestra, the Santa Fe Symphony Orchestra, and the New Mexico Philharmonic. She shares her home garden and brightly coloured studio with her husband, 2 cats, 3 fish, and 1,000 books and plants. My interview today, we're going to cover a whole lot of things, including we're going to talk about YouTube, because for some people that might seem like a version of rote teaching. And we know that a lot of our teenage students and adult students are on YouTube watching tutorials. Is that rote teaching? We're going to talk about that. We're actually going to show you how to teach a rote piece, and Amy's going to be at the piano live. So I think you're going to really enjoy seeing that in action. We're going to talk about scaffolding rote learning and how creativity and improvising can emerge from a rote teaching approach. So we're looking at this from the lens of this month's theme, which is teaching beginners. And so we're going to cover the whole aspect of teaching beginners with rote pieces and some methods that use it and why they do it and why it can be a great thing for your studio. Now, I do apologize. The first 5 or 10 minutes of this episode, the connection with Amy is a little bit choppy, but it does even out very soon after that. So do bear with us. I know you're going to get a lot out of this episode. And please enjoy my interview with Amy Greer. Well, Amy, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, awesome to finally meet you. And I wanted to get you on the show after I interviewed Dennis Alexander, and we were talking about the book that you guys wrote together, which is called Repertoire by Rote: 7 Piano Pieces to be Taught Without Traditional Notation, and for the bargain price of $10. And, you know, how could you go wrong with that? You don't even need to know what's in it for that price, right?
Thanks. What a salesman.
So look, how did you come to be working with Dennis?
Well, that's a really great story, actually, and a lucky break for me, honestly. So like every piano teacher on the planet, I've taught Dennis's works for my entire career, so for 20 years. And, like all of us, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't teach something that Dennis wrote. And about 8 years ago, I was standing in my kitchen, and one of my good friends came in. Well, I was having a party or something at the house. And one of my good friends came in and said, "Amy, you'll never guess who just moved to Albuquerque." And I said, "Who?" And Anne said, "Dennis Alexander." And I said, "It's not that Dennis Alexander." Because you know how Dennis is a household name in piano teacher world. And I said, "It's not that Dennis Alexander." And Anne said, "I think it might be that Dennis Alexander." And to my, great fortune, it was that Dennis Alexander. And he and I became fast friends. He's just the most amazing colleague and mentor and all of those things. He's taught my kids. We've judged together. about once a month, we have burgers and fries at a local pub, and we solve all the problems of the world, including all the ones in our profession. And it was over one of those lunches that I said, Dennis, you know what you need to do? You need to write a book of pieces that can be taught just by rote. Because I had been doing this my whole career very much in the closet, like so many people had been doing until the last few years when it's kind of become something that's more pedagogically accepted.
Accepted, yeah. It's suddenly okay.
Yeah, it's suddenly okay to come out of the closet and rote teaching. But I had this this notebook of pieces that I've been collecting for, 20 years that I have been teaching by rote. And whenever a kid of mine would play something in a recital and another teacher would hear, they would say, where are you getting these resources? And I would be like, yeah, it's my little precious notebook that I've been collecting of these kinds of pieces that teach well. So I knew that there weren't great resources for rote music other than those of us who had been treasure hunting. And so I said to Dennis, you know what you need to do. You need to write a book of pieces that can be taught by rote. And his response was, I'd be willing to do that if you'll work with me. And so I teach a lot of little kids, and I've been doing this for a lot of years. So he and I started working together, and I'd write a piece or he'd write a piece, and I'd teach it for a few months, and we'd work out the kinks, and we went back and forth and back and forth. And one of the things that Alfred requested as part of this project was that the pieces, because teachers who were interested in rote teaching kept asking us, but how do you do it? How does this work? Show us how to do it. So Alfred made, as part of this book, kind of a manual on how to teach pieces by rote. So that's the reason behind so much of the instruction in the book, is that the idea is that it is pedagogical for teachers as well, and kind of gives them an insight of how to break down a piece so that kids or adult beginner students could learn to do it.
Brilliant. And I know that for a lot of teachers, as you say, this is kind of not something you're allowed to do. And so it's great that we've now given them the skills, and your book actually explains this is how you actually approach this style of teaching, because it is very different.
Right.
I think we should.
And it's too bad it was in the closet for so long, that it was seen as a way that teachers were not doing their job and not teaching kids to be able to read and be independent learners and all of those things. So it's nice that it's joined the mainstream enough that we see this as a piece of the puzzle and not a way to avoid what needs to happen in music teaching, as well as all those good old note flash cards and rhythm drills. It isn't to not do those things. It's just as a way to supplement these early years in particular with pieces that are more appealing and accessible to students.
And I say, for any new style of teaching or ideas, this is only one part of a comprehensive music education for a student. So we are not saying that everything should be taught by rote now. We're just saying this is one skill that you can have in your toolbox that has some great reasons behind it, and and kids love. Let's face it. So what do we mean? We should probably just define teaching by rote, in case there's any teachers out there who are unsure about what this means.
Yeah, what I think of as a good rote piece, and a good way to think about teaching by rote, is it's teaching pieces that are hard to read but easy to play. And that you can do that you can do that at an interview lesson. You can do it in the first and second and third lesson, in the first and second, third month, the first and second, third year, to kids who are at the same time simultaneously learning the more traditional way, but then they have these pieces that sound appealing and become great little recital pieces. They're all memorized because they don't read them. And so they're pieces that they can play when they walk past a piano at a hotel or in their music classrooms. They're pieces they own. And it's a great way to work against that horrible thing that we've all heard kids say when you say, oh, you take piano lessons, play something for me. And they say, well, I don't have my book.
Yeah.
And,
it's awful, isn't it?
it is awful. And not to say that they shouldn't be able to read pieces in their book. They should. But that's their only thing. So rote teaching is teaching. It's not so different than what kids have been doing for each other for years when they teach each other chopsticks, and they teach each other heart and soul, and teach each other the theme to Ode to Joy or whatever. That's rote teaching. It's like one pattern, one note, one phrase, one part at a time until they build this piece. And what can happen is that they can do this without knowing any of the names of the notes on the piano or any of their flats and sharps. If a piece is very, very patterned, then it can be taught by rote easily, and can teach students all sorts of really helpful musical things. Ear training, pattern recognition, just the physical choreography of moving up and down the piano. A good rote piece keeps you out of the center of the piano. I once had a pedagogy teacher who encouraged us to make sure we taught all 88 keys and not just the 20 in the middle.
Absolutely.
And, in rote teaching, it opens up the doors for things like that from the very beginning. I almost always teach a rote piece in an interview lesson. It's a way for me to see how quickly a kid will learn, and it's a way for the kid to walk out the door with something.
Yeah,
so it's a win-win for both of us.
Absolutely, and you can see how well they're listening, how musical they are. You can get a great appreciation for their skills straight up. I think it's a great idea. Interestingly, I had an experience with the positive power of rote teaching just last year when I taught a student. He was a young boy, he's about 8. Great kid, really enthusiastic, and I started him on Piano Safari method. And one of the early pieces in that book, you probably know Julie and Katie are very much include rote teaching and improvising and stuff. And one of the early pieces is called I Love Coffee. Don't know where the name came from, but it's one of those chopsticky kind of pieces. And he just loved it so much that he had to play it at an assembly. So I recorded a little backing track, and, he was just beside himself. He loved it. So I totally get the merits of doing this. I think it's brilliant. Right. And I'm so glad that you've gone to the trouble of putting a book together on it.
Well, Piano Safari are those folks are some of the people that are really bringing it out to the mainstream. So it's good for those more traditional method books to be incorporating this and saying, this is a piece of the puzzle. This isn't this isn't the flip side of the coin. This is just a piece of the puzzle.
Yep. And if anyone listening is interested in Piano Safari, then I actually interviewed Julie and Katie on the podcast last year in 2016. So if you're interested, you can head to timtopham.com/podcast and you'll find the episode there. All right. So I think we should maybe get into some demonstration. You're at the piano, which I'm so happy about.
Right.
Can you talk us through maybe one of your pieces and how it works?
Sure. Why don't I do the one that I do in interview lessons, because it's very, very simple.
Right.
And like I said, I've done this with 5-year-olds. I've done it with adult students. I've done it, with any number of age groups. But it's a great little piece that they can learn quickly, and I can assess a lot of skills, as you said. So it's called Desert Rose. Dennis and I live here in the desert. So Desert Rose, here we go. So very simple. So the first thing I would do is first I would play it. I would tell them the name of the piece and I'd play it. And depending on the age and how verbal and articulate they seem to be with me, I might say, okay, when I finish, you're going to have to tell me 3 things about this piece.
Oh, that's great.
And, the idea is that it'll make them pay closer attention if they think they have to come up with 3 things. So the 3 things might be, you played with both hands. It went up the piano. It used only black notes. You use the pedal. It could be any number of things. Oftentimes they're very, very basic things, but there are things that are good to identify. We've all memorized pieces, and gone to the piano and can remember the first note, right? I mean, we've all been there in terms of memorization. And so these are kind of like basic, make sure you know big picture things. And if they're not forthwilling with three things, then I'll ask questions. Did I play on white notes or black notes? Did I use the pedal? How many times did the left hand cross the right hand? Whatever. I mean, just whatever comes to mind, I'll ask. So the first step in teaching rote pieces is to play and ask lots of questions. Ask lots of directed questions. Make them figure out what they're seeing. Now, obviously, if I'm doing this in an interview lesson, I would expect that the kids wouldn't know finger numbers. But if I was doing this 2 or 3 months in, I might say, what fingers did I use in my left hand? What note did I start in with my right hand? You can ask those questions. But for this one, we're assuming that they know nothing. This is a black and white landscape that they know nothing about. So the best we're probably going to get is you played on black notes. So I just did that once. I asked questions. I probably would play it again. But then the next thing I would do, if I can grab without losing you. Hold on one second, Tim. I should have been more prepped.
No, you're right.
The next thing I would do is sing the piece with the words. And I use a lot of Dalcroze in my teaching, a lot of eurythmics. And so I would sing the piece using the words, and I'd pass the ball back and forth. With the idea is that they would start to feel the beat. Again, we're not talking any real specific rhythm, but just kind of the basic big muscle gestures of feeling it. So this very, very sophisticated lyrics go like this. Desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, blooming, desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, grow. So they're getting the sense of the beat. I'm passing the ball to them.
I was going to say, for anyone listening and not watching, then we've got a little ball, red ball in your hand, haven't you? So you're passing it between you and the student.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, great.
And so we were just passing it back on the quarter note beat. Of course, I would not give them that much information, but that's what we were doing. We were passing it on the quarter note beat. And I might then the second time say, I wonder if we could pass it on the rhythm. Can you pass it with the words? So instead of passing just a straight B, we're passing it with the rhythm. Desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, blooming, desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, grow. So again, the idea is that they're feeling beat, they're feeling rhythm without any real instruction at this point. Then we come back to the piano, and the first thing I would do is simply set up my hands on the piano, and I would ask them to imitate, find the same fingers that I find, same places, just so that they can find the setup. I'm always talking about, let's find the setup. So find the setup. And then I would play the first line again. I'll say, I'm going to play the first part. This time we'll say the words. Desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, blooming. Desert rose, desert rose, desert rose, grow. Now, the hard thing with these little rote pieces is they jump octaves so much, so you can't actually sing on pitch.
I noticed that.
You don't have, there's only so many octaves we can sing. So generally I try to actually kind of just chant it rather than pitch it, because there's so many clusters in that too, that way it's not confusing. So we've done it with passing. We've done it with passing beat and passing rhythm. They've learned the words. This is pretty in their ear now. So I might say, I'm going to play the first part one more time. Can you count how many desert roses? Blah, blah, blah. And they would say 3. So then I'd say, you want to try it? Well, the answer is always at this point, yes, because I've kept them away from the piano long enough that they are very eager. And, whether the kid is 5 or 55, I have never not had a kid basically be able to do that. They've seen it now. They've sung it. They've passed it. They do the first 3 desert roses. And then we tack on the blooming. And then we've got 3 more desert roses. And then we have the last note, grow, which is way down there, which is super awesome because we're using more of the 88 keys, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so at this point, I might step back and say, so how many desert roses? And the answer would be 6. But again, the idea is, are we teaching them to track patterning? So that they go home and they can remember, oh yeah, there were 6 desert roses and then blooming and then grow.
So you're really you're scaffolding their learning so brilliantly with all the preliminary exercises, and I think this is so crucial for any teacher. Even if you're not doing this rote teaching, if you're teaching a simple reading piece, even a hard reading piece, whatever it is, one of the mistakes I think so many of us, or the traps we fall into, is we're not prepared. So the next piece comes up, we put it on the music stand, and we're like, okay, let's start here. Whereas the real teaching is actually in the preparation, in my opinion.
It is. Yeah, you're totally right, Tim. Because if you do the prep work really well, the teaching teaches itself, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's nothing like teaching rote pieces to then inform how you should break down anything.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
That's work as a teacher, but also, what I've seen from years and years and years of doing this is the kids have incorporated those sense of steps, and so when they hit a Beethoven sonata, the first thing they do is, how do I break this down in parts? So they're thinking form because they've been thinking form since the interview lesson, and I think that having to break down teaching like this, like I said, informs all of the rest of the teaching you do that day. The note reading stuff you do, the rhythm exercises you do, how to sight read, it's the same thing. And I really, really use a lot of balls, a lot of stepping, a lot of singing, a lot of chanting as part of everything they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a wonderful way of physically incorporating beat and rhythm, again, from the very first lesson. And in ways that aren't using the language. I didn't say quarter note. I didn't say half note. I didn't say any of those things. I just got it so that this is what they felt. Desert rose, desert,
And that's Adele Crow's kind of approach, isn't it? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in episode 28, if anyone's wondering what Del Crow's was about, I did an interview on Del Crow's as well. So that's timtopham.com/episode 28. You can check that out as well.
We need all of these things, we need all of these tools in our toolbox.
Yeah. And I'm all about, let's steal the best from all these different approaches and have them at their ready, because not every student needs the same approach too. So it's good to know, this kid really, really loves the big motor skills of percussion kind of stuff. I'm going to use that. So that's why I'm so passionate about what I do in these podcasts, is share these ideas. But I think the best thing for teachers who are listening or watching this to get out of today is just the incredible depth with which you scaffold students' learning before they even get to the piano. And then as they progress through the piece, even on the piano, you're still reminding them about these connections to patterns too. Let's talk about patterns for a moment too, because I think it's another thing that is starting to gain more traction, is the concept that we should be helping our students understand the patterns that are in music. It's not just a line of music that goes across the page. There's patterns to everything that we do. Do you think this kind of rote teaching really helps bring that out from the beginning?
I think so. And I think it does it from both a physical patterning, this first pattern, we're going to hear that 3 times. So that's a physical pattern, but it's also an oral pattern. So they're getting both at the same time, and they're getting this completely, not to state the obvious, but without the music in front of them. So it's not the black dots on the page that are teaching the patterning. They're learning to track physical patterns as well as sound patterns. So yeah, I think that whether or not a piece is well patterned is actually part of how you can determine whether it's a good rote piece. Because if I find myself thinking, oh, it'll be far easier if they could just see the music, I would never teach it by rote, you know?
Yeah.
It has to be a piece that's so patterned that, what's challenging about Desert Rose is nothing about the playing. It's the fact that it's in the key of G flat. Well, a kid walking through the door should not be able to play in the key of G flat, right? So that's what's great about it. And that's what I mean about rote pieces need to be hard to read as a piece in G flat would be. And it jumped 3 octaves. So you'd have to have a fair amount of real note reading skills. But it certainly is easy to play. And so that's the key behind what is a great rote piece. And I wanted to say something also. You keep using one of my favorite words, Tim, which is scaffolding. I went back and got a degree in educational psychology, and they use that word a lot in ed psych, scaffolding.
It's something I've picked up from my classroom teaching too. It permeates the classroom teaching.
Yeah, it's such a good word. But what I also think about a lot, and I think about it in terms of teaching an individual rote piece, but also in terms of structuring the whole lesson, is the idea of circling. And so that you do something and then you get away from it and then you circle back to that idea and then you get away from it in a little bit different other way and you come back to it. And with rote teaching, what we have to come back to is, are they imprinting this? Are they going to be able to replicate it at home? And all the ways we can have them be able to verbalize or understand patterning, those are the ways that give us information about whether or not they're going to be able to replicate that again at home. And so it's like, we have them play it and then we stop and ask a bunch of questions. We circle back. Oftentimes what I'll do then is make them leave the piano and we'll sing it again. Sing and pass it again, whatever. Just the idea is that we keep kind of circling and reinforce. I mean, it's reinforcement.
It's reinforcement and review, which is so important.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But it's super important in rote pieces because they don't have anything. They're not leaving with anything but the memory of what I've taught them. And so it becomes even more important to do that kind of circling, scaffolding stuff. But then again, like I said, it kind of informs then how you teach everything.
And I notice that you've mentioned singing a few times and you've provided words for these. And I think I'm learning more and more the connection between singing and students being able to play more easily. There's such a strong correlation there. Do you use that technique in normal written pieces at all, even if you're not singing lyrics, because a lot of them don't have lyrics, but somehow vocalizing rhythms and things?
Right. Yeah, very much. Beginning stages, my kids are assigned to tap their pieces as well as play them. So the right hand taps the right hand, the left hand taps the left hand. But then later, when the kids are in, let's say, sonatinas or whatever, and they're not going to tap those rhythms because they're complicated and they've got 16th notes and dotted rhythms or whatever. But we'll tap beats and we'll chant, what I say chant. And so, yeah, in terms of more traditional counting or stupid chanting words, I'm a big fan of stupid chanting words.
What's a good stupid chanting word? Come on.
Well, my kids often say, do you really like food? And because I use a lot of food words, eighth note, 2 eighth notes to a quarter note would be ice cream cone, or watermelon, ice cream cone, or blueberry. I use a lot of those. And so the kids, or students, I say kids, but I mean actually students of all ages, we use a lot of what I call rhythmic vocabulary that isn't necessarily counting vocabulary, because there's nothing terribly rhythmic about 1 and 2 and.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of rhythmic vocabulary. So yes, that kind of chanting, singing, yes. And you know what? I've noticed something recently. I have, when kids have graduated from rote pieces, which depends on the kid or depends on the student, and I determine that by they can read so well they don't need me to pattern out a piece anymore. I mean that's kind of the line. We do a lot of ear tunes, is what I call them. So I've played a bunch of tunes on CDs, and then they're required to replicate them in their lessons. And I have figured out that if a kid can't sing the tune, they can't play it.
Mm-hmm.
They simply can't because they don't have any tools for replicating it if they can't sing the tune. So whether it's like Oh Susanna or Camptown Races or whatever the folk tune might be, if the kid can't actually sing it, even on La La La, they're not going to be able to pick it out.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Really important.
So your point is well taken, is the connection between singing and chanting and movement and all of that goes way beyond Desert Rose, hopefully.
Yeah. Do you tend to do, it sounded like you do all the rote pieces first and then you introduce reading, or do you overlap?
I'm doing them side by side.
Yeah. So along at the same time.
Yeah. So, my goal with little beginners, like I have a 5-year-old right now, so I can use him as an example. He has a new rote piece every week. And certainly in the beginning months, he's been with me since June. So certainly in the beginning months, the rote pieces were simple enough that he could walk out with an entire piece every time. Mm-hmm. Now they're getting complicated enough. He might walk out with half a piece or something. But my goal was he had to keep the number of pieces that his age was on his rep list. So we build up to 5. And then once he was up to 5, then every week he got a new one. He could pick one to have go away, but he had to keep a 5 rep, rote.
5 pieces that he could play on call.
Any time, on any piano. When grandma says, play me something, Johnny, he can play his little 5 pieces.
I like that idea of relating it to their age. I think that's cool.
Yeah, but then at the same time, we were doing, I use Alfred Premier, I use Faber, I use a variety of Music Tree, I use kind of all of that stuff. So he was doing that side by side.
Yeah.
But the truth is, those little beginning pieces are kind of boring.
Yeah.
They do really good things, but
you're talking about the reading pieces.
Yeah, they're not as interesting, and they certainly don't move around the piano because they can't. They're doing something else. So I do it side by side.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And what ages and levels have you found that your pieces in your book work best with?
Well, I've done them with 5-year-olds. I've also done them with adult students. Dennis has done them with a lot of adult students. That's kind of his focus and for teaching these days. And so he really does them with a lot of adult students. I've used them with adults as well. I've used them with, preteen, teenage kind of beginnerish students, or rote pieces can be very helpful for transfer students too. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes it's something that's totally new that you do, and especially if there might be holes in their pedagogy, you can fill that in a little bit. So the answer is we've test drove them on all ages. Yeah. And they seem to work. And I always want to reinforce that, my notebook I collected for 20 years is very thick and it's awesome. And I still teach a lot of those rote pieces, with the point being is there's rote pieces everywhere. If you just know what to look for. There's good rote pieces out there in all sorts of literature and all sorts of method books. I'll have a kid sight reading something and I'll think, oh, that's a good rote piece. I could teach that to a 7-year-old instead of having a 9-year-old sight read it. You know what I mean? And so there's tons of stuff out there if you start to know what to look for.
And I assume those things, without going into too much detail, the things to look for are very obvious patterns in particular.
Yeah. Like I said, I think if you can remember this, hard to read, easy to play.
Yep.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Is it pattern? Is there something about it that's odd? Like, does it change octaves so many times that it makes it tricky to read, but wouldn't be that hard to just teach? Things like that. Or funny key signatures, G flat, whatever.
Yeah.
Those are pieces that are often screaming to be taught by rote earlier than they show up in method books or whatever.
Now, we all have experienced students teaching themselves by the YouTube rote teacher. And I know everyone has different opinions on this, and I'm interested in yours, but I'm also interested in whether, learning a student teaching themselves something from YouTube is actually a form of rote teaching.
I think so, don't you?
I do.
And and I don't have any negative opinions about it. I mean, I think we traditional teachers can get very uptight and concerned that somehow they're going to teach themselves wrong or whatever. But this isn't a nuclear weapon, this piano. You know what I mean? Like, nothing bad is going to happen if they teach themselves something from online. So I mostly say the more the merrier. And I also think that anything, first of all, it's time consuming, and it's let me just say time. It's time consuming to teach yourself something online.
It's
from
incredible how much time students, if they really want to learn something, they will commit hours of practice.
Right. But isn't that great? Like, what are we complaining about here?
Yeah,
it means they love something. They're willing to devote time to it. They're willing to, break it down. It doesn't mean that what they've learned there, they can transfer to anything else. I mean, there is a sense that they've just monkey taught themselves something. It's not a skill that they necessarily can transfer to something else. But if they wanted to do it, more power to them is what I say. And I think what we can do in the piano studio is we can take this concept and we can put better pedagogy with it.
Yes.
We can, but it's the same concept. And so if it's out there and they're doing it, the truth is they've been doing it for decades. We all learned heart and soul, not from a piece of paper. None of us learned heart and soul from a piece of paper. We all learned it from another kid teaching it to us, at recess or something. That's how we all learned it. So.
That's good. I feel very much the same about YouTube. I have no issue with students learning stuff from YouTube because it's going to keep them playing and interested, and it gives them things that they want to play to their friends when they come over to hang out on the weekends, which gives them kudos and positive energy and makes them want to learn more. I just will always say in a lesson, if it's a teenager, for example, who tend to love YouTube the most, we'll say, yep, we'll spend a little bit of time on that. And if I can, I'll help you learn a bit more or fix some problems with it, or I'll help them understand the concepts behind it. If it's a pop song, I'll analyze the chords with them or whatever. And then we'll do our other stuff as well. So I would never devote an entire lesson to supporting their YouTubing.
Right.
But by the same token, I think it's really detrimental to a student to have a teacher who just says, no, don't do that. That's all wrong, and you're going to get a really bad technique, and I don't want you doing it. Because one, you'll lose that student very quickly. Two, why would we be discouraging them playing the piano?
Absolutely. And I think your point is well made, is you don't have to spend an entire lesson doing it. They're going to do it on their own.
Yeah. And they're going to do it whether you tell them not to or whatever.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah. Brilliant. All right. Well, look, we're going to start wrapping things up a little bit. And I had a couple more questions. Oh, yeah. So going back to your piece that you demonstrated, the instructions are all on the page in front of you, I assume. So is it okay for teachers, in your opinion, to have that music in front of them while they teach from it to give them cues, or do they need to kind of memorize this whole process?
I certainly don't care. I mean, I think the truth is that these are easy pieces. They'd be very easy for a music teacher to immediately have. At the beginning of the book, I say there's a general step-by-step thing you should do, which is you should play and ask questions. You should sing and do something with rhythm. You should then go back to the piano and play and break it down. And then you should rinse and repeat those steps over and over again. And, if teachers want the step-by-step thing in front of them at the beginning, fine. But more or less, that certainly isn't a strict blueprint as the only way you could teach the piece, as much as it was a response to what we kept hearing when we were doing workshops, which was, teach us how to do this. How, and so that gives them a kind of a map to how to do it. And then if they deviate, more power to them. I think it's all about, we're only as successful as what's authentic to us. And so, I think that if teachers find, hey, this step put here really helps my students, great. We're all after the same final product. The Desert Rose is probably one of the very most simple in the book. And some of the other ones, the book is not intended to be taught over 7 weeks, even though there's 7 pieces. The later ones are much more difficult. It's much more of an idea that, this is an example of something you could do in an interview lesson, and this is one that you could do in the first couple of months, and here's one you could do in month 3 or 4. And the idea is that this could provide a year's worth of, not a year's worth, but a year sampling of kind of where kids might be in a year and how rote pieces could still fit in.
Brilliant.
And so it's not intended to be taught in any way sequentially or, like I said, over the course of 7 weeks. And what I, will keep saying is there's lots of rote pieces out there. So you teach Desert Rose on the interview lesson, and then the first lesson you teach, something that you found in Piano Safari, or there's tons of resources out there. And make up your own, make up your own little patterned piece that you can teach. You can teach your students of various ages as well. So this is certainly not anything that either Dennis and I ever intended to be very dictated.
Yep.
It was more, here's how this can be done.
Yep.
And it's lucky for us that it's hit the world where the world seems to be receptive to the words rote teaching instead of seeing that as a 4-letter word. So it's kind of hitting the world at a good time, but there's lots of resources out there. So these are just examples about how to do them at a very simple level, and then, a few levels out from there.
It's brilliant. You've given everyone who's listening, I think, the idea that they can go and find some of these pieces themselves and create their own rote pieces. And using your book as a model, I think it is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll be soon releasing, actually in probably March or thereabouts, my own approach to teaching beginners over a number of video lessons. And one of my big things is no music for the first, I say 10 weeks at least. And pieces like this, these rote pieces, are just fantastic to include with beginner students. So now I just want to finish with a quick question on creativity, because you give workshops on creativity. I'm incredibly passionate about supporting creativity in piano teaching. Is there a relationship between the rote teaching, the pattern-based kind of method, and what you could do creatively with students from that experience?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the basic link is they are immediately introduced to the idea that music isn't just something that's in front of them on a music rack. That music is something that they can create, or they can it's their relationship with the piano or whatever their instrument is. And it isn't what somebody else wrote down. And because when we're teaching something by rote, the teacher might have the piece in front of them, but generally I don't. And so they're just seeing this music come alive from my hands. It's not dependent on black and white dots on the page. And so from that reason, I think there is an immediate link that this is something we can all do. It's not just Beethoven or just Mozart or just these books that are in our piano bag. And, I do, my kids do compositions every week, and we do a fair amount of improv in lessons. And I do it, I have 1,000 different approaches to how I do it. But in these very beginning things, when a lot of these rote pieces are on black notes, I might say, okay, we even suggest this in the book, is that Desert Rose can turn into Yellow Truck really fast if you play it different. Honk, honk. Yellow truck, crash. So we have suggested in the book that you can actually change Desert Rose to Yellow Truck. But the idea is that sometimes we can take one of these rote pieces and then say, okay, could you make it sound entirely different? Whether that be play it louder, play it, go change the octave, whatever. I mean, they're simple. There could be very simple things that they do at the beginning, but so that they can put their imprint on stuff from the beginning. I think that there is an easy way to take these rote pieces and use them as a jumping off place for improvisation or composition or whatever. I mean, a very basic thing is to say, okay, can you write a piece that uses that 10 times?
Right. Yep.
I mean, there's a lot to do it.
Yeah. I like the simple question of asking students with you, what if we play the pattern backwards going down the piano? What if we move to white notes? What if we jump off all the keys? What if we use the pedal the whole time? What if it doesn't move octave from the bottom octave on the piano? I love doing that kind of stuff. And it's just such a simple way of getting kids thinking outside the blocks, in my opinion. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Rote pieces like this are really open to what if questions. What if we do something a little bit different?
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea is, again, that music is flexible, that music is not something that is strict and black and white, even though that's exactly how we see it, right?
Shock horror, Amy.
It is something that we can create and we can change, and we can do that on the spot, and they can be a part of that. I think anything that has them not looking at a book encourages other kinds of thinking. And so, the short answer is, I think rote teaching has all sorts of places to jump off for in terms of composition and improvisation, and how to have a kid think more creatively. That's one of the great things you can do with rote teaching is you can really work with sound and with speed and with all of these things because they're not bothered with the reading.
That's exactly right.
You could say, let's play the first one really quiet. And then what do you think for the second one? Should it be really loud or really soft? And then the third one, so that they're again in dialogue with how this thing is going to be eventually.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good place to leave it. What a fun conversation. Thank you so much for giving all your great tips away. I think if people want to find out more about you and your work, is 10,000stars.net the best place to go?
Yep. That's my blog and my studio page.
Fantastic. So it's 10,000stars.net, and that's all written out, so no numerals in that. Head there if you want to find out a little bit more about Amy and what she's up to, and we'll put links on the show notes page to be able to download Repertoire by Rote, the fantastic book we've been talking about today. So I hope some listeners jump onto that and give it a shot. If they've never tried rote teaching before, I can tell you that the book, in actual fact, I found some example pages from the book, so I'll put a link to them as well so teachers can actually see what they're going to get, because it's just so approachable. Love it. So thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing.
Thanks, Tim. Great to talk to you.
All right, we'll leave it there. I'll speak to you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. We'd love to help take your teaching to the next level as a member of our supportive community. Use the coupon Piano Podcast for $100 off an annual membership of Tim's InnerCircle today. To find out more, head to timtopham.com/community.